operations here in Canada. And then I moved on to my current role. I'm at Mercer as a global client manager, where my role is not as technical as it used to be. It's more of a relationship-based role, but I use all my experience and the knowledge I've acquired through the years and my curiosity. I'm still very curious about actuarial world, so I get to talk a lot about it with different clients. So it's still a lot of problem solving, and I volunteer a lot in the actual profession where I'm a chair of the DNI advisory group of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. I do a lot of work related to professionalism as well with the CI, the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. I volunteer with the SOA as an editor for the SOA, the Actuary magazine, but the Canadian version of it. And I also am the IABA Montreal affiliate leader as well. I've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Thanks, Valerie. So, hi, my name is Chika Ayadiuno. I am the chair or co-chair with Nandi, who's on the line, I think, of the UK Black Actuaries Network, which is actually very, very new. It was an idea I'd been thinking about for some time, and it felt a long delayed network that we needed to build. So we're at our infancy, I would say. In terms of me and my professional background, so I hail from the non-life or P&C actuarial space. I was started off in pensions, but didn't last very long, and then switched over to P&C. I was a reserving actuary. I did some work in capital. And then switched significantly into enterprise risk some years ago, which is where I operate now. So I'm now Chief Risk Officer for Munich Re, our specialty business. So it's a reinsurance company, but I operate in the primary specialty business. And I do some work for our professional body, the IFOA. So I am chair of what we call our diversity action group. I think I'm handing over to Nicola, is it?
Hello, I'm Nicola Barrett. I'm a Jamaican actuary, and I live and work between New Jersey and Jamaica. I'm also the president-elect of the Caribbean Actuarial Association, and I see at least one of our members here today as well as a mentee and a few friends. I'm head of forecast model development at MassMutual, which is located in Boston, Massachusetts. And in that role, which is a combination of FP&A, financial planning, as well as corporate actuarial, I lead all of the development of the forecast planning models and the forecast planning process within MassMutual. I also have some affiliation to IABA as well. I represent MassMutual at IABA, so I know Jeff and the IABA team quite well. And I work on DEI initiatives, as well as I'm hiring manager for the actuarial program here at MassMutual. So a lot of different sort of fingers in the pie from a lot of different angles. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Anthony?
Yep. Hello, everyone. Anthony Weatherspoon. I'm an American actuary based out of New York. I'm going to be serving as on the board of directors for the International Association of Black Actuaries coming in 2025. I've had over 15 years in the actuarial profession with leading insurance companies, integrated care delivery systems, and consulting firms, specifically in the areas of pricing, mental health parity, value-based care, capital adequacy, and also actuarial modernization. For IABA, I've coordinated the professional development sessions for the IABA annual meeting. I served as a friend of the board. I've helped lead our impact and member strategy. I've also served as a chair on the Young Professionals Advisory Council for the Society of Actuaries. I'm also a passionate supporter of D&I initiatives, and I've done that at several organizations throughout my career. I do want to say, I think the most important thing that I do believe about the actual profession is the duty of this profession. And I also believe in finding purpose in your work. I think I've been fortunate to be a part of a profession that actually allows for the duty of this work to not only not conflict with my purpose, but also the duty is actively contributing to the delivery of my purpose. And that purpose is to affect change. So I'm grateful to be here and happy to have this discussion with the rest of the panelists.
Thank you guys so much. And Anthony, so just so that everybody knows kind of how the flow will work today, obviously as the host and moderator, I have a series of questions that I'll start with. But we also want to make sure that we open the floor so that we can get your questions answered. So I get to play host today, but I also get to play chat moderator. So as you think of questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And if there's stuff that we can't get to, my sincere hope is that I can email the questions to the panelists, and if in their free time, they can answer them all, and maybe we can get those emailed out to everybody. So again, thank you guys for being here. My first question, really, Anthony, is to piggyback. This is for everybody, but this really piggybacks off what you were just talking about, Anthony, about purpose. In line with the theme of UK Black History Month of reclaiming narratives, how hard has it been for each of you to kind of maintain a sense of identity in a predominantly white dominated field? So
That's a good question.
Let's just work backwards. Anthony, we'll work right back. We'll work backwards.
All right. Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think reclaiming narrative is really going to start with first being sure in your identity and who you are. The fact that you're in the actual profession already shows that you have an aptitude for the work. Across the international organizations, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of Black actuaries that are going to believe in you and want you to succeed. So once you have that confidence in yourself, I think it really goes back to just the sentiment of being knowledgeable and having spaces where we can thrive. Once we do that, I think we can build the ability to strengthen the reputation of Black actuarial professionals, which can further reinforce our identity, not only individually, but also as a collective.
I'll go next. So the biggest challenge I face right now is as a hiring manager, quite frankly, not as a Black person who is an actuary, who happens to be an actuary, because I happen to be many other things besides being an actuary, which I love, by the way. The biggest challenge I face is the notion that I'm only looking to hire Black people, and that's not the case. Of course, I have an eye out for diversity, all kinds of diversity of school background, international versus native. Certainly have, of course, a passion for the Caribbean and so on. But I feel that the challenge is that, when we talk about diversity, and in many cases, companies come to diverse people to work on diverse initiatives because of our expertise in being diverse, because we're diverse, right? And so there's this notion that that is our singular focus, and that's not the case. I've hired a lot of people who aren't Black, who aren't from the Caribbean and so on. And so for me, it's not necessarily even about the actuarial work or any of the technical aspects. It is about the challenge that people sometimes see us as that's our singular focus, and that's not the case.
Hi, I guess it's my turn. I'm interested in the phrasing of your question here. So it's about reclaiming, reshaping, which suggests that something was there and it's been lost and we need to get it back. I think maybe it's the UK journey specifically that the representation, although it's growing and has grown quite a lot recently, still nowhere where it could be and maybe should be. And I feel that the journey of the UK is somewhat lagging in lots of different ways in this space. The North American experience, in my opinion. So I'm not sure that we had a narrative that was lost that we need to reclaim in the context of the profession. So it's about, I would say, establishing ourselves, and it's about checking biases that may be there. Rather than reassessing a particular narrative. It's not particular, I don't think, to the actuarial profession. It's broader than that. It's the workplace, the professional workplace, but more broadly. So there are a lot of things going on there. So I think there is work to be done. I think things are getting better. If I look at other professions, they may well be more established in the UK in terms of having a voice for the Black community. If I think of lawyers, teachers, Even our police, they've had established Black communities, Black networks for some time. So in the UK, for our profession, it's a fairly new concept, and I would say it's post 2020 where we became more visible and more vocal in this regard. So we're at the early stages, I would say, and slowly doing what we can to make sure that all the things that we suspect are out there, not specifically in the context of the profession, in terms of biases, assumptions, stereotypes, all of that sort of thing, is being looked at and worked on.
A lot has been said already, but I want to say, like, from my perspective, the whole reclaiming the identity part of it, a lot have shifted around during the last couple of years. For a very long time, I was afraid of putting on my resume that I was part of a Black specific organization or something like IABA, for example. Where I'm from, it was just sometimes I'm like the only one. Like, I go to big conferences where I stand and I look around and I'm like the only one. So I was very afraid, but I feel like the past couple of years have allowed me to use my voice and to stand up and just identify as an IABA leader. I use that, people know it, and I feel like things have evolved. So I think it was about being there also for the future generation. So now they know they can reach out to me, and having that sense of community is also so we could help each other. And even in my work environment, being able to say the things, use my voice to really say it the way it is so people can understand our reality and our perspective. And sometimes they won't always be happy to hear what I have to say, but I feel like I've owned it, and I really changed over the past couple of years, and I feel that's where I feel like I'm in my purpose, and I'm able to help the future generation of actuaries and the way we're perceived in our professional environment as well.
Thanks, Valerie. I'm going to come right back to you, but I do want to acknowledge really quickly, Eric. I do see your comment here in the comment section here from Nicola. But I want to come back, just go right back around in the reverse order. Can you guys take a second for me and just reflect on your journey up to this point? Each one of you guys represent a very different segment of the Black experience, right? Talk about your unique challenges that you faced coming as you've risen to the spot where you are now as a Black actuary.
I can go first if you want. My journey started, I'm based in Montreal, Quebec. There are a lot of actuaries where I am. So there are a lot of schools offering actuarial programs. There are a lot of graduate. There's even that one school in Quebec City that some people will say, they used to say they were the best actuaries. I personally didn't want to move to Quebec City because as a Black person at the time, like I'm a bit older, and at the time I just didn't see myself. I felt there was not, like Montreal was not that diverse at the time, and Quebec City even less diversity. So I made the decision not to go to that school because I couldn't see myself living there. So now I know things have evolved, so I wouldn't want people to think that I'm still thinking this, but at the time that was my decision process. So I stayed in Montreal. So when I graduated, I wanted to go into consulting. I started doing retirement administrative work. And when I wanted to transfer to consulting, I was always told there was always something. I didn't have enough exams. There was always a reason. So that's how I ended up moving to the US. I got my opportunity in consulting in Philadelphia. So French is my first language. I speak French all the time. That's what I'm used to. So all of a sudden I find myself in the US trying to express myself in my second language every day, all the time. Clients, the reality is different. I didn't know like the American like laws, regulations related to pension. So it was like this whole, I often say it was complicated just to get my foot in into what I wanted to do. And now today I have this amazing career, and people ask me how I've managed to come to where I am, but it was about getting out of my comfort zone so I could do what I knew I was able to do. And when I came back to Montreal, when I decided to transfer back to Montreal, everybody in the office was a fellow. So I was like, okay, so I guess I have to finish my exams, but becoming an actuary was my second career choice. So I already had studied in a different field before. I was older, and people here were fellows in their early 20s, and I was older in my 30s when I finished and became a fellow. And I remember they were telling me like, oh, you're the oldest person studying. So it was hard, but I managed.
Would you like me to go next, Jeff?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm very conscious when trying to give a perspective on the Black community that it's very diverse in the UK. So my own personal experience would not be necessarily typical of others in the UK for lots of different reasons, which we might touch on. I was born in the UK. I spent my formative years outside of London. Now, the reason why that is significant, for the similar reasons I think, Valerie, you're alluding to, outside of London where I grew up was not diverse at all. So I was very much one anywhere I went in terms of ethnicity. And that was no less true for when I joined the actuarial profession. I joined, it's a wonder how I joined, if I'm honest, because there was no reach out. It didn't really, I joined by accident. And it's something I think the profession is doing a lot better at now, but still could do more in terms of reaching those different parts of our population, which may not even know about the actuarial profession. If I look around, when I joined the workplace as an actuarial student, it's nothing compared to what it is today, but it's still not ideal today. So I would say isolationism was a huge challenge that I faced at the time of joining profession. However, because I was used to it from my upbringing, the way I grew up, growing up outside of London, I would say that I tolerated it and was able to deal with it in a way that I didn't even know that I was dealing with it at the time. If I kind of roll through the years, I understand now that actually that did have an impact. It would have impacted my confidence, my tolerance for assumptions being made about me, biases that were there, implicit and explicit. But I accepted it in a way that probably I shouldn't have, and probably many people wouldn't. So it's hard to know because you don't know exactly what challenges or obstacles were in my way. You can assume, but you don't ever know. The kinds of challenges that you face are always going to be bubbling beneath the surface. Very, very rarely, there were occasions, but very, very rarely are they vocal or explicit. Always very, very subtle. But I do suspect that, frankly, my whole approach to work, my personality even has been affected by challenges along the way. My pathway through organisations, my confidence has been affected. But what it does mean, having understood that now, I place a very, very high value on networks, and that's why I'm delighted that we are getting together in this way. And I always talk about that to my younger colleagues. I place a very, very high value on sponsorship, something I never, ever had throughout my life in the workplace.
My journey has less to do with the fact that I'm Black and the fact that I'm from Jamaica. And so when I finished high school in Jamaica, I came to America to go to university. So from that standpoint, I grew up in a country where there were plenty of Black people who were very successful, did well. My parents went to university, so on and so forth. But it's also a country where there are Black people, white people, Indian people, Chinese people, and all of us are Jamaican, right? Not to oversimplify. So coming to America was more about the difference between me being American, not American, as opposed to me being Black. And I was used to seeing Black people successful, so on and so forth. My perspective was, and maybe it's more of a Caribbean perspective, is, you work hard and so on, right? So my opportunities were go to university, study hard, take exams. I chose this career and I knew what was involved, and I knew I would have to work very hard. So, there are times when I've been asked, well, what did you have to overcome and so on and so forth? And my answer is nothing. I knew I had to work hard, and I knew I had to, in order to become an actuary, which was my main goal. So my challenges were more around being an immigrant than specifically about being Black. Now, race in America is different than race in the UK and race in many other places, and race in the Caribbean. Diversity in the Caribbean is probably less about race than it is about other things, right? So you see, we all have different aspects of diversity, and we all have different aspects of our personality, or of our identity rather, that we prioritize differently. for me, I'm Jamaican first and foremost. I'm also a wife, a mother, and some other things. Well, I'm also an actor as well, right? But my number one identity is being Jamaican. And so for me, I felt like that was the biggest difference I felt. But I didn't think it was anything I needed to overcome. I just had to work hard. Now, Chika just said, look, there are a number of factors that we cannot see, right? Perhaps there were jobs I went up for that I didn't get or something. Yeah, I can't see that, right? And I choose not to focus on that. I choose to focus my time, my energy, and my peace of mind, quite frankly, on the things about which I am passionate. And Anthony mentioned passion earlier. I'm passionate about creating opportunities, which kind of leads into the question that someone asked. You know, how do I combat that perspective about I'm only focused on hiring Black people? I create opportunities for lots of people, even people who don't come to work where I work. I create scholarships, I mentor, I do a lot of things to create opportunities. And I realize that that one opportunity can change the trajectory of somebody's career, their future opportunities, and so on. One internship can change the whole landscape for somebody when they're up against other people who have exams, have an internship, have whatever it is that they have, right? So I'm passionate about creating opportunities. I love what Anthony said about having a job and an employer and something that feeds your passion, and it's all intertwined and so on. So for me, that's the most important thing. But there are a lot of tough conversations that go with this, a lot of very, very tough conversations about diversity, about race, about the ethnicity, all of that. So the answer to the question is, it's very difficult. And there are many times, and I say this to other people, that I have to walk into a room like Martin Luther King and not Malcolm X. And that's nothing against Malcolm X. It's a different style. It's a different, right? You have to understand the room that you're in and the room that you're walking into. But I own every room that I walk into, right? I feel like I belong there. I don't feel like anybody can kick me out of that room. And I don't listen to what other people think and what other people say, which, hey, that can work either way. But someone also mentioned self-confidence and those other things, right? But, maybe I'm just at a point now where I feel very secure in myself. I know what my skills are. I know what what I'm capable of. But the most important thing to me is what I'm passionate about, not whether I'm building another actuarial model or whether I've passed another exam. It's what I'm passionate about and what I choose to spend my time and my energy on.
Yeah, that's great. I think my background just gives me perspective. I know the journey I've been on, and that is not unlike others' journey as well. And I think, as Chica was alluding to, one thing that's often common in our journey, particularly those who may be older like myself, is that before we got in profession, we didn't even know that this profession existed. I had to find out from my dean in my college in my junior year about small majors that no one knew about that was related to math and business. And I think the lack of awareness is due to the profession not being as prevalent in our communities, particularly when it comes to like American urban communities. And knowing that I could have potentially missed out on such a rewarding and influential career that offered like so many opportunities for me, I find purpose in making sure that other people like me who came after me would be aware of the actuarial profession. But that in itself has provided its own challenges. Some of the challenges I face include finding a place and a voice in rooms where, as people have mentioned, that I may be one of the only ones or the few that look like me or have my racial background. Um, Often we do need to navigate spaces that we're unfamiliar to, but we have to have a confidence of someone who's been there before. And as I mentioned earlier, like generally, that confidence is going to be instilled via just internal and external factors. Um, the internal is usually going to be reinforced through a thorough knowledge of materials and also the subject matter. But the external is going to be reinforced through leaders, as I think Nicola was saying, that sponsor safe spaces and that allow people the grace to actually be themselves. For me, I kind of made it a point to prioritize the former for myself, as far as like being knowledgeable in materials and the subject matter, but also be vocal about the latter, and both to and for others, including leaders and my direct reports.
Thank you, Anthony. So I have a bunch of questions that I can continue to go on and on about. There is one question in the chat that I want to make sure that we get to. And guys, as this conversation continues to go on, feel free. I am monitoring. So if there's a question that you have, throw it here in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to ask a specific panelist, or like in this case, this question is just in general, so I'll throw it out there. It deals in imposter syndrome. And I was gonna say, Nicola, you gotta stop, looking ahead, because your last answer, every answer always answers my next question. So my next question for the group is imposter syndrome, where you have doubts your ability to become a successful actuary. How did you overcome it? If you've dealt with imposter syndrome, how did you overcome it? They said that this is a very important conversation as younger talent kind of wants to hear your testimony. So have you dealt with imposter syndrome, and how did you overcome it? So Anthony, I'll start with you, and then we can go right around if anybody wants to jump in and tackle that question.
Yep. I'll say this. Imposter syndrome is something that I think I ran across for myself initially at one point, but then I realized that there is a solution. I don't know if it's a solution for everybody, but it kind of gets to what I was mentioning before, just about being knowledgeable in materials and subject matter. Sometimes and often, particularly in our profession, the facts are the facts and they speak for themselves. If you're armed with those facts, regardless of who you are and what you look like and what you have done in the past, usually that's going to carry weight. It should carry weight. The second thing is, I think also, again, we talked about identity and just knowing who you are and having your background. I think you need to be armed with the fact that, particularly when it comes to Black actuaries, that there are hundreds and thousands of Black actuaries who have your back, whether you know it or not. All right, so understand that you have the support system that is not just like domestic or national, but is often international, as you can see here, that is going to push you and want you to succeed. And I think that can be reinforced through engaging in the organizations that you see represented here. I know for me, I was flying rogue, I say, for a few years in the beginning of my career, where I didn't have the support system that I believe I do from an International Association of Black Actuaries perspective, then also the other organizations you see represented here. I just wasn't involved. I wasn't involved for like 2 years. And then once I went to that first meeting, I found myself knee deep and passionate about a purpose outside of myself. And I think that any imposter syndrome that I might potentially had kind of evaporated now, because it's not just for me, it's for others, and it's for the people that come behind me. So like I said, that may be just me in my story regarding knowledge and finding purpose, and then also having a network. But I think that those are keys to any like solution towards imposter syndrome.
I would agree with all of that, but I would also just challenge a little bit the premise that there is a solution. I think more people than we would imagine experience these feelings, either momentarily or throughout. So just some are better at masking it than others, even the most successful, regardless of who they are, where they hail from, or their age or their superiority within an organization. That's my understanding in more recent years. So don't presume you're the only person who is feeling this way. I think, Anthony, you're completely right that the best thing that you can do for yourself is to, especially from a professional point of view, is to do everything that you can to make sure that your knowledge, your technical skills, if that's what's required, your ability to do your job, you're doing everything you can to put yourself up there. I always reflect on what additional skills could you bring, because there are zillions of actuaries wherever they hail from, whatever their ethnicity, and lots of really, really good actuaries. So, the professional thing should speak for itself. The technical skills should speak for themselves. You passed a bunch of exams, you've got the work experience. My question would always be, and I always reflect on that when I'm hiring or when I'm looking around a team, what else do you bring to the table? really think hard, because a combination of different skills will elevate you and also give you the confidence. And if you understand what else you bring to the table, that can give you that confidence to hold your own, and it will be a permutation of skills that will be different to any other person. And if you have that in your head, it will support you. I'm not saying it will take away that sense, because sometimes it's okay to have that, because it keeps you grounded, but it will stop you, I think, from being overwhelmed.
I have not felt imposter syndrome professionally. I have felt it personally. If we can share personal details, I felt it about being a mother, right? I wasn't sure that I had the skill set for that. Luckily, I grew into it. But I've never felt that professionally. Now, have I felt nervous? Yes, of course. Especially, you take on a new job, a new role, new company, new whatever it is. Yes, there's nervousness and so on. But I always feel like, when I was a younger actuary, I always felt, oh, I don't have the specialization in disability insurance. I don't know worksite. I don't know health. I don't know, you start off building your technical skills around a particular discipline and so on. And I would look at senior actuaries and think, oh, that person knows, way more than I know and so on. And I finally got to a point where I realized that this is not rocket science, right? All you have to do is be prepared. You have to be prepared, which probably goes along with technical skills, all of those kinds of things, right? And even today I'm working on something and I have to prepare before I get on that call, right? So I don't think I have ever felt that professionally. But yes, you feel nervous. Yes, you feel, you have to grow into things. But knowing that you have the skills and the confidence is a big part. I also second what Chika said, that, a lot of people feel this across the whole, not just professional, again, but personal, as I've just shared, and so on and so forth. So, this is not unique to us. It's not unique to Black people. It's not unique to actuaries. But, be confident in yourself.
So my next question, and Chika, I'll start with you. How do cultural attitudes towards race, culture, diversity influence, or how has it influenced your experience, both within your company, but also looking at the broader actuarial landscape? How has how has attitudes about race and diversity kind of influenced your journey? You're still muted, Chika.
Yeah, sorry, it's a big question, I was saying, and I want to be sure that I fully understand it to address it. The big question I think you're asking is, what is the attitude to race and ethnicity in the UK, which is huge. I could be here, I could do a thesis on them, I can talk about this at length and possibly still be missing a bunch of stuff. But that's what you're getting at, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So yeah, well, it's a journey. It's changed and hasn't changed. So let me reflect back. So I grew up, as I said, in the UK. I was born in the UK, so my experience will be very different to many other actuaries in the UK who probably grew up in their home countries and have a way different experience. They would have been in the majority. So I grew up in a country where I was absolutely not the majority. I grew up at a time where explicit racism was the norm, directed at children even. So it just was unthinkable, the sorts of things that were said and done in the name of racism. You don't see that these days in the way that I'm referencing, but the racism is probably more subtle, generational possibly, but it manifests itself differently, is my sense. And in the workplace, it's different as well. So I can give a couple of examples. So London is really diverse. You go onto the streets, you'll see every colour, language. It's fantastic. You step onto the tube, the underground, and you will see all of this. However, if you're really observant, and one thing I do see is I get on the train quite early. I can tell you with a fair degree of accuracy who will come on at different stops, which ethnicity, even which age group, sometimes which gender at different times of the day. So you can be misled if you jump on a train, especially central, and you have a look at the carriage and you see a melting pot of ethnicities. What you would have missed is that certain types would have got on at different stops. So we are still actually quite segregated, even in London, by class, by colour, by ethnicity, all of that sort of thing. And what's even more interesting is in the workplace, in the offices, you don't see, even today, still that melting pot that you might see if you're on the underground in certain offices. So culturally, we might feel that we are no longer where we were in the 70s and 80s, but it's just manifesting itself differently. So the issue is not so much how does this play out in the actual profession? It's a more macro playing out. So we've got different levels of maturity or progression, depending on which employers or which sectors that you are talking about. And so much needs to happen, but so much has happened. But it's like a pendulum. So you might take a few steps forward, and we had a huge step forward in 2020 after the George Floyd murder. However, predictably, to my mind, I think we've had a backlash the other way for a number of different reasons. There's fatigue in terms of DEI initiatives, and there's been a backlash for other kind of geopolitical and kind of social reasons that are going on in the UK as well. So it's really complex and it's not linear, I would say. And it's also nuanced because, as I say, different people come with different experience. Someone who is UK born and Black, and someone who spent their formative years, say, in West Africa or Jamaica or wherever, will have a completely different take and a completely different experience.
I'll go next. One thing I would also like us to acknowledge is that, cultural attitudes towards race and diversity also occur within the Black community, right? It's not just outside towards the entire Black community, it occurs within the Black community. And, as an immigrant who, moved to America, there were attitudes towards me as a Black person coming from outside of America and taking jobs in America that belong to Black people who were born in America, right? So we do it to ourselves as well, right? And that's one of the things that we also have to acknowledge. When I see that happening, I think to myself that, number one, I think we do it to ourselves, and number two, we hurt ourselves by doing that, right? And just because we're all Black doesn't mean we're all going to like each other, we're all going to get along and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, right? But it is an incomplete picture to think that these types of attitudes towards race and diversity only occur outside of the Black community towards us. It also happens inside as well. And so those same conversations need to take place.
I want to add on this topic that for me it's about like that whole code switching as well. From my experience, I said French is my first language, but my parents are from the Caribbean, so I speak French with a different accent when I speak in my home or with my family than when I'm outside and there's that French, Canadian, Quebec accent. So I switch all the time, and I realized at some point in life I was like, okay, I have to find a ground in the middle somewhere. But it reflects for me, it was just the way I spoke, just that it changed so much. And I realized as well from a cultural attitude, I had to accept who I am. I had to accept the diversity as well amongst the Black community in my region as well. In my affiliate, a lot of IEBA Montreal affiliate leader members they came here as students, so they come from different African countries. A lot of my members are from African countries. They come from, and they have the different cultures. So I've been trying to kind of educate my in my work environment about the fact that we all have different cultures and our backgrounds are different. There are some that are immigrants, there are some that were born here, but it's also about us being curious about each other as well, learning, not assuming we're all the same, and understanding where we can make a difference. So for me, there's that big so I realized it was like internal as well. I had to change the way I was myself and not trying to fit in that much and accept who I am and accept that I'm different and there's value to it.
Yeah, I would just add this piece. I'm going to agree with all the other panelists regarding the experience of Black actuary, particularly in the workplace. I did want to add just one different lens, which is more about the experience of like the actual work and some of the work that we do. I think regardless of what sector that you're in, whether that's P&C, health, life, et cetera, I think enrollment and demographics are going to play some role in your analytics, particularly with the advent of ESG and like diversity initiatives. Looking at demographic data with a racial and ethnic lens is going to be more prevalent. And actuaries generally have some insight as to like any disparities that can exist when you're looking at the enrollment piece. The actual profession itself is really no different. When we look at disparities in the percentage of Black actuaries, where it's like 2 to 3% of all actuaries are Black, compared to like the percentage of Black professionals employed in these industries, where it's like 13 to 15% of professionals are usually Black, you see that there exists some disparities in just the way we're employed. I would say this, that given that this shift in the professionals' general thinking towards attracting and retaining and development of diverse professionals and actuaries, it's not just for equitable representation, but also to further understand the work that we are engaged in, whether that's environmental, social, and governance work, whether that's foreign and domestic markets, and even emphasis on socioeconomic issues that may come up, like whether they're in finance, whether they're related to morbidity, whether they're related to mortality. All that shifting in thought has provided some opportunities for Black actuaries, particularly when it comes to like insights regarding the work that we're doing and giving a different lens of the work that we may have had in the past. So while the experiences that everyone's mentioning are 100% true, I do think that there's also work that we do, that we engage in, where a Black actuary can succeed, particularly because we do offer different insights and different backgrounds and different perspectives when it comes to this type of work.
Thank you, Anthony. I want to switch gears a little bit here pretty quickly, and not to create a jolt in anybody, but I want to ask you guys to think about your younger self. So again, going back to that we're all older now. Thinking about yourself as a younger actuary or as a younger person thinking about this profession. What advice would you give yourself right now, based on all your experiences that you've had? What advice would you give yourself? And Anthony, I'll start with you, and we'll go right back in order the way in which we came.
Going back some years, I probably tell myself that who you are matters, and the work that you're going to be doing allows you to be yourself. And that's getting back to what I mentioned just regarding purpose. Growing up the way I grew up, without having as much as I would eventually, I guess, attain through life based off of just working in this profession, just make the connections I've made. I think I have a perspective of understanding that there wasn't a lot of opportunity unless you went and got it. But that being said, I also think that there are things that are systemic within our culture, within particularly American culture, that may be barriers to success. And if it's on me to get these things that I've wanted throughout my life, then it's on me to also break down those barriers as well. And so what I say is that, yeah, you're going to proceed in this profession based off the things that you know and the things that you can bring to it. But it doesn't matter as much unless you can find ways for others to come behind you and do the same. And so get involved with organizations like the International Association of Black Actuaries. Do work when it comes to being on panels, speaking about the experience of Black actuaries. Understand that there are people out there who are going to go through the same things that you went through and will need somebody to have a voice for them, you know, and be able to speak to them. And hopefully, because you didn't have that when you were growing up, that you can be that for somebody else.
Thanks, Anthony. Nicola.
Nicola. So
Nicola, I'm over here fighting for my life, right? So in the southern. So for those who don't know, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, super southern, and so it's like everything is just super like southern. And anyway, I'm gonna get it. I apologize.
That's
Blame
okay.
my head, not my heart.
That's all right.
You know
That's
I
all
love
right.
you. But continue.
Okay, we're going to have a test. Chica, can you please say my name?
I'm pretty sure I got it right, Nicola. I only went for Nicola
Perfect.
because
No.
yeah, but it's Nicola.
No.
Nicola. That's
it.
I
That's
wouldn't
all
have
right.
said it the other way.
Thank
but
you.
yeah.
Thank you. Right. You can call me Nicholas until you drop the S. All right. Good job. What would I tell my younger self? You know, as a youngster, I'm always myself, right? And I always want to be myself and so on. And so I think I have always been able to do that, but there's a cost to being yourself, right? Especially when you are in, well, I'm not even sure if I would say especially, but I would have, I hesitate to answer the question because I wouldn't change any part of my journey if I could, right? But perhaps I would have cautioned myself to say, you know, pay some attention to corporate culture, pay some attention to, you know, the sort of informal things going on around you, and the sort of informal spaces that are there around you, as opposed to, you know, I was very, very focused on the work. I did my work very, very well. You know, when my company went to business casual, I wore what I wanted, I said what I wanted, I did what I wanted. You know, I'm that type of person, right? And looking back, I can see that there were some things that I guess I chose not to pay attention to, right? But I don't think those things necessarily derailed me from success, but now I try to create those spaces for other people, right? And for young people coming up and so on. You know, at my last employer, we hired 27 summer interns, all of whom were IIBA scholarship recipients. That's a large group to bring in all at once. And it was part of a big diversity push that came from George Floyd's murder. And I remember I created it may have been Friday, like Friday, 5 p.m. after work Zoom call, right? Where everybody was invited to log in and you could talk about anything you wanted to. Suppose you didn't want to ask your manager what the acronym AZX meant, right? But you could ask us, right? Or if you want to say, hey, is anybody else feeling this or that, or whatever it is that people wanted to talk about. So I wanted to create that informal space where people could have that freedom and, you know, that type of thing that, you know, either I felt I didn't need or I didn't pay attention to when I was coming up. But I realized, and there are a lot of things I realize now, like being Black means different to different people, right? And that being A or being B means different to different people, and that people need different things. And I want to be able to create those opportunities for people, even if I felt like I didn't need them, other people need them. So that's what I would have told my younger self. Don't change a thing, but learn from learn from the journey.
For me, it was like the total opposite. Like I missed answering the question on imposter syndrome because of technical issues, but I had so much imposter syndrome when I started. So so what I would tell myself would be to not be afraid to showcase the value that I bring, that I add to team and to own what makes me unique, but still be very curious and not to be afraid to ask questions. Because I remember when I did understand, I would spend like so much time trying to figure out things on my own. And I was in consulting, so I couldn't put the hours on my timesheet. But then at the end of the year, it would backfire because I would be working a lot, but then not put all the. So it was just it was so complicated for nothing. So I realized how I could have made it much more easier on myself. So for sure, I would just say like, we have to learn, but we can't be afraid to say that we need to we don't understand everything. And whereas everybody seems super intelligent, we've all been through the process where we started somewhere. So it's normal not to understand everything from the get-go. I wasn't one of the actuaries who understood everything right away. So I wished I would have given myself a little bit more grace.
I think that's me. So I think there are two things. So one is actually on reflection. I think one is to be more Nicola, based on what Nicola said to my younger self, be a bit more Nicola. But I think two things. I wish I had looked up and out more. I was very introvert, internally focused. Head down, I gotta work hard, work harder, work harder. I should have looked up and out and realized that there were somewhere out there people who could have been part of my support mechanism, and I should have found them. If I had found them sooner, I think my pathway could have been quite different, and probably a little less lonely.
So message of the day, be more Nicola. Be more, right? Message of the day. We could all
That's
go
the message
home
of every day.
Right. We could so next time we gather this group, we'll just hop on, everybody say that, and then we'll all shut the
That's
door
right.
and go home
We'll
for the
last
day.
5 minutes. My best friend says, WWJD, what would Jesus do? She speaks. WWND, what would Nicola do? And
I
then
love
she does
it.
that.
Right there. That's it. When you see me do this, that's the thing. So hey, I want to round this out. I have two more questions. One about the global actuarial community, but I'll save that one for last. It's Black History Month in the UK, and so I think we owe it to ourselves to really just put a kickstand down there and talk about what does Black History Month, if at all, right, look like in our respective regions, and is there value, is there purpose, why the whys around Black History Month. So I'll put a kickstand there. Anthony, I'll start with you if you don't mind. What does Black History Month look like here, and is there still relevance to it?
I definitely believe there's relevance to it. I would say it is a celebration of our centuries of history that we have in this country. We have an original sin, and that gets talked about a lot throughout the course of the month, but also throughout the course of the year. I think, though, we have a lot of glory that comes out of what we originally had to go through that gets celebrated, particularly things like a Harlem Renaissance, things like Juneteenth, even though it started with the original sin, and just the beautiful things that you see like that happen throughout the course of the month. You learn a lot about our forefathers and things like that. We get to enjoy great food, great celebrations. I do think that while it's just a month and it is the shortest month out of the year, let's not forget that that it allows us to really look at like who we are and what we want to be as a people and a culture going forward. And I think particularly just with the actuarial profession, I think that we've done a good job in the United States of actually pushing more thought around what we could do from an actuarial profession standpoint during that course of that month. I know that IABA has made like concerted efforts to put out things on social media, like getting awareness out to Black history in general, but also like some of the things that some of our Black colleagues have done within the career, and then also with the Society of Actuaries and American Academy of Actuaries, there are some focuses there. I think that just moving forward from a profession, I would like to see a little bit more of that going forward, and just like stronger initiatives regarding like what we can do from thought leadership perspective, particularly in the sectors that we work in, um, and how we can focus on like educational series during that time regarding like some of the work that actuaries are engaging in. We talk about social disparities within healthcare and within even like financial sectors. I'd like to do a little bit more focus as far as initiatives around that in the course of the month to not just celebrate the fact that we're where we came from, but also but where we could potentially be going. And while I believe that, you know, we've done a lot and it's a great month, I just feel like there's probably more work to be done. And I feel like that falls on us.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm not going to give you guys any direction on the order that we're going to go in. I'm just going to let you guys fight amongst yourself about who goes next.
I can jump in. That's fine. So we're probably at a different stage in the process in terms of our understanding and utilisation of Black History Month in the UK, I believe. And I see good sides and bad sides to it. At its best, I think it enables individuals, organisations to engage with what remains a difficult topic for many in the diversity space. So we're very comfortable now with dealing with things to do with gender, for example, and other aspects of diversity. We still remain a little bit clunky, a bit awkward, a bit uncomfortable with the topic of race and ethnicity. So when you have something which is out there and it almost gives you permission to engage with the topic, you can join forces with others. I say to my family, it's my busiest month because it feels like there are so many events that you're either invited to attend or invited to speak at, but it gives organisations permission to engage with the topic. It also gets them to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, which many companies still are. However, at its worst, it can just be very tokenistic and it can just be event driven. You have a bunch of events for a month and that's it. And then it's the same again, repeat next year. It's also, there's no so what, there's no value, there's no traction to anything. So it's meaningless if you don't have that. And some organizations, some sectors do that better than others. So it can actually lead to structural change. It can lead to better inclusion, better awareness, and there's a so what to it. If there isn't any of that, and that is the case in many, then it's pointless.
I'd say that here in Canada, for a very long time, we kind of like Black History Month, we were more celebrating the US Black History Month instead of having our own. So I feel like nowadays it evolved where we're kind of questioning ourselves about the Canadian Black history a little bit more. Many of us were our immigrants, or our parents were immigrants, so we kind of knew about the history from where our parents were from, but not necessarily the history here. So we're kind of, but it's also history in the making because it's not like it's not there is some history, but it's still evolving as we're talking. So it was just this realizing that we have to kind of be a little bit more curious about what happened. Like, were there like other like past generations of Black people and that were here before our own parents? Because for some of us, it's as if we thought our parents arrived in the 70s and that was the beginning of it, but there was history before that. So it's worth it for us to celebrate. I do organize events with the Canadian Institute of Actuaries specifically for the Black actuarial community, but we invite everybody so everybody could be aware that we're celebrating Black History Month as actuaries. But there's a big need for us to continue to be curious about it and to kind of know what happened specifically in this country.
So we don't have Black History Month in the Caribbean, and we're a group of many, many different countries. But and quite frankly, diversity for us is not necessarily along racial lines per se, but perhaps more along class lines, right? We have more classes than races, and I would venture to say. So also a tough question. So we don't have a month where we celebrate that, but we do celebrate our heritage. We do celebrate our the various aspects of our heritage and so on. But we don't have a particular month for that. So
Can I ask a follow-up? How does that feel to come from a space where we're not where heritage is heritage, and this is what we celebrate we celebrate who we are all year long, to a space where we are now, since you said you spent about half the time here in the States, to a space where we dedicate a month to talking about the rich history that is our history.
it's very different. It is very, very different. I mean, just when I go home, I feel very different than when I'm in the States. And I also hear that from other Black people as well who aren't Caribbean, from Black Americans who go to the Caribbean and, whether they go to Africa or, things of that nature. But for me personally, I feel different. The air feels different. It just does around all of that. And it's like the places and the spaces I walk into feel different. Everything feels different. There's some of it that's still the same. The corporate environment, you have to deal with corporate issues wherever you are, but it's different. It's different.
I've often described it to people as I feel lighter when I travel. Like when I travel to spaces where I'm going and everybody there is Black. It's like that's not something that I have to carry. Whereas here, I feel like that's what meets people first. It's Jeff the Black guy is what oftentimes you get met with first. And so we open this conversation talking about identity. And I'll tell you that even in my experience here at IABA, this is the first space that I've worked in where it's everybody around you is Black in some way, form, or fashion, right? And so that ability to just show up and not have to be anything other than Jeff, you're not speaking for the rest of the Black community. You just get to be. And I think that's what I get to experience when I travel, or when I'm in majority Black environments. You just get to be present in the moment and don't have to be anything else. I think the way I've often described it is just I get to feel lighter for a short amount of time. So thank you for that context.
Can I
I
add
promise you
something?
guys.
I
You
just
sure
wanted to
can.
just add a little something to what you just said, because I just came back from a trip. It was my first time going to Africa. I went to Tanzania. And when we got there, they were like, welcome home. And it felt like I felt it, the welcome home, the way that person looked at me and said, why did you wait so long to come back home? And I felt it. It was just, and I realized it was the first time in my life where even though I've been back to where my parents are from, but I've never been told like to welcome home this way. And I was like, I finally feel like I'm home. And I've waited almost 45 years for that.
That's a wow. Yeah, that's a deep feeling, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, Valerie. My last question. I promised you guys we'd wrap this thing up so everybody can go back to doing what they have next on their agenda. What do you think the global actuarial community can do to foster stronger international connections between us as Black actuaries?
I'll start. I don't think that this profession is meant to be isolated. While we're all a part of our domestic organizations, and even in our practices, we're kind of bound by national regulations. The core competencies of the profession are generally consistent across like all organizations in the globe. Particularly, I think for Black actuaries, we have an intrinsic diversity that's just due to our experience and cultural commonality because our shared histories, which we're speaking a lot of right now. And I think that diverse experience and those core competencies and shared culture, it kind of needs to be embraced, and we should all kind of seek out opportunities to kind of strengthen those relationships. So, yeah, I think it's going to be part of us things are going to be on us to be a part of each other's sessions and in our meetings, and then find ways to collab and do things together when we have the opportunity.
I would agree with that. So if I just reflect on the past hour alone, I feel like I have benefited from the conversation, from the shared experiences. I have some takeaways in terms of how I should reflect on things and how I could be. I think there is something about different journeys that we're on. If I reflect on the small community that is growing within the UK actuarial profession, I know that we would benefit from understanding what you do, how you do it in your respective areas. I've been looking deeply at the people who've dialed into this. I don't know how many are from the UK. I didn't recognise too many names. I know that we're all very busy, but I would like one very, very specific thing. I would like to understand how we can better galvanise the community that we call the UK Black Actuaries Network, because we are a long way from doing that. I'm very impressed, jealous indeed of the way, Jeff, that you were able to pull this together, the tools that you had at your disposal, the kind of promotion, all of that. We have none of that, and it relies on one or two of us trying to scrabble about and do various things. So I think we are stronger in numbers, and I would like to consider you all as part of our numbers.
I would agree with that. Collaboration, networking, finding common things to work on. And, Jeff, you and I have had some of those conversations already. I would also like to, thinking of, diversity in a broad sense, right? In the Caribbean, we have more than Black people. Not everybody from the Caribbean is Black. Not everybody from Africa is Black. Not everybody from anywhere is Black, right? So just sort of thinking of it in that broader context, in terms of how it is that we can support each other, network with each other, collaborate with each other, etc. On that one topic, I've also heard the criticism that, well, if you work on things that are broader than that, Black people get left behind, if you try to get too broad, and, so those kind of things as well. So, we always try to find the right balance. But yes, I think networking, collaborating, and finding common and tangible things to work on, right? We want to work together and get together for being diverse may be the reason why we come together, but it's not the only thing we have to offer each other, right?
I agree. I also agree it's about like us taking the time to listen to each other as well and realize we have different perspectives. Because I feel I've learned so much from this conversation as well. And also in my role and everything I do as a volunteer, I do see like the younger asper. I can't speak English right now, but the younger actuary, the one who's hired them actuaries, they have questions, they have their struggles, and they sometimes need to hear different perspectives. So very often they will ask me how it went for me, but then I try to refer them to other people so they could hear that there are different ways of making it in the profession. So continuing to talk, but also to listen, because I think that we can't assume we all have a similar experience.
Last but not least, Anthony, did you answer?
I did, but I wouldn't want to say
Okay, cool.
that.
Go jump in.
Okay. Nah, everything that everyone said afterwards, I think is important and made a lot of sense. One thing I would just want to add is that these type of events, these forums that we have, are extremely helpful. Jeff, again, as Chica, I believe, mentioned, great job putting this together. The more of these things that we have where there are opportunities for us to get the perspectives from different areas that we normally don't have an opportunity to talk to, or at least have a forum like this to actually engage in this kind of conversation, I think is going to be helpful. I mean, we talked about taking things home outside of just being more like Nicola. Yes, is one thing is just thinking about what IAVA can do from a perspective of trying to put more of these kind of things on. I think that there potentially could be things that we do with some of the organizations from even like an affiliate perspective that maybe we want to just talk about a little bit more. But yeah, really enjoyed this.
Well, Anthony, as a board member starting January 1, I will leave this to you. No, I'm kidding. To champion, but there was a comment from Jackie in the comment section about just excited about the global outlook, and obviously wants to bring in Africa and to be part of this conversation. And as much praise as you guys want to push to me for putting this together, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Namdi for being the one who started the conversation with an email to our vice president, Stephen Abrokwa. So Namdi, thank you for starting the conversation. My commitment to you and everybody watching today is that this won't be the last one. So Jackie, this is directly in reference to your point. This will not be the last one. I think everybody has points that they took away. And from IABA's perspective, this is something that I want to make sure that we continue to have this conversation, to the point that I would like to invite you guys, anybody, to our annual meeting, which is typically the last week in July. But the Caribbean Actuarial Association, they're having their annual meeting the first week in December in the Bahamas. And so I'll be there. I think this is a great start to a conversation. And I would love to continue to have these conversations. If you're able to come to the Caribbean Actuary Association's annual meeting, I would love, I'm going to do them a service and invite you guys out. I think there's still room at their annual meeting, but we can have these conversations in person. If you're going to be able to travel to their annual meeting, you can travel to ours, and eventually for the UK Black Actuaries Network, we will be there for your first one. Whenever you guys are ready to host your first annual meeting, we will be there. And then there's some good stuff on the horizon for our Canadian partners as well. It's in our strategic plan to host something up in Canada next year. So for all of those in attendance, thank you for being a part of this conversation. And to our panelists, give them a round of applause for answering every question, no matter how hard or how bad I butchered the name. Still, you know. But we will, the U.S. annual meeting, fingers crossed, we will have an announcement about our annual meeting before the end of the month. Fingers crossed, we will have an announcement about our annual meeting at the end of the month. But this is going to be the first of many conversations. I promised the group that I recorded the convo. We will upload it to our YouTube page, and we will send it out to Chika in the UK Black Actuaries Network so that they can email it out as well. So thank you everybody for participating. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.